Hello and welcome back to videos on tutorial series in Python, and today we would be talking about lists in detail. So let's get started. First of all, we would declare a list named myList, and let's say it consists of list of fruits. So let me define some elements in it. Apples, bananas, okay, and then kiwi, cherry. I would be adding some extra items because I have to show you multiple operations. So what are the other options? Grapes and tomato. Let's say it's a fruit. Okay, I would show you some operations that you can perform on my list. For example, if I want to add another element at the end of my list, then I can use an operation called .append and I can perform it on my list as follows. So this is the variable that contains the list, and I would use the append operation, and then I would assign another string, say which fruit, onion. It's not a fruit, but let's add it. So if I print my list again, then what it would show, it would add onion to my list at the end, not at the start. Remember that. Now, another way of doing that, if I want to insert a character, a string, or a number at a certain location, then for that I have to use a dot insert operation on my list. So how would we do that? It would take in two parameters. First of all, it would ask me about the position or the index. For example, let's say 3, and then it would ask me what to add here. So I can add Gava here. So if I print my list again, then you would able to see the difference. Now at the position 3, Gava has been inserted and my lists have been updated again. You can see that it did not remove any item, yet it did create a position at 3 and add Gava on that. So now I would show you how you can add a list at the end of a list or a different data type at the end of the list. So for example, if I define my new list called vegetable list, and similarly I can pass some strings here, onions, okay, tomatoes here, and then potato, potatoes, and then lady fingers. Okay, then now I would show you how you can add the veg list at the end of my list that had fruits. So for that I have to use an other list operation that's called extend, and after using this operation you would just simply pass the name of the other list. And if I print my list again, then you would see there would be any additional elements from the vegetable list that I just showed you. So now I want to remove some items from my list. So for example, tomato, many of you can say that it was not a fruit. So I would put it again to my updated list, and now I want to remove tomato from my list. So how would I do that? My list dot remove what I want to remove. I want to remove tomato because many of you might not like it there. So if I run this line of code and print my list again, then you would see that now tomato is deleted from my list. So this is how you can delete a certain element from a list. Well, there are different ways of doing that. So let's say I update my list again and now tomato is deleted, so it's all fruits. Now I want to delete a certain element from a certain index. So how would I do that? For example, I want to delete kiwi that is at index 2. I would use a list method called pop and it would ask me to put the index. So I put the index 2 and I print my list again, and then you would see that now kiwi has been deleted from the position 2, or you can say the position 2 element has been deleted. So now I would show you how what would happen if I don't specify an index here. It would just remove the last item. So let's drop this and use the pop without index and print my list again. Now you would see that it would remove the last item from my list because tomato was already removed, and then it removed the grapes also. If you don't pass the index in the pop operation, then it would by default remove the last operation. So I can assign my list again here at the end, and now I would show you another operation how to delete a certain element. For that you can use a keyword in Python called delete, and then you can put my list and which index you want to delete. You can just put it here. For example, I want to delete an entry from my list at position 1, and if I print my list again, then you would see that from position 1 bananas string has been deleted. Or if you want to delete the whole list, then you just have to print the variable name here, and then if I want to show my list again, let's see what happens. My list is not defined because I have just deleted the list. So let's say remove it for now because we are operating on lists. So now I want to show you another items that how you can traverse through the lists. So hang on. So now I would show you how you can traverse the whole list using for loops or while loops or if else statements. So for example, I told you earlier as well, then you can pass through the strings elements as well. So for example, if my string is banana and you put a for loop on that, then my for loop will traverse through each letter one by one. In case of list, it would pass through each of the entry one by one. I would show you how. So for example, I use a for statement here and an iterable variable, say I, in my list, and then I would terminate it with a colon. Remember that. Now I want to print what I want to print. I want to print I. So if I run this line of code, it would print all the elements of my list. Similar to string, you just have to remember that whenever you are using a for loop, you have to terminate it with a colon operator. Now I would show you another way of doing the exact same thing. So for example, if I want to traverse by the indexes of my list, then how would I do that? I would use the for keyword again, and then for x, this time a new variable x in. You can use a Python function called range that is some sort of uh, a list of numbers that it could traverse through, and then I can pass it the length of my list, and then I would close it with a colon operator. So if I want to print each element, so I would use my list and then I would pass the index here. That was x in our case. And then if I run this line of code, then you can see that it would again return me the same number, same elements in the list. If you are new with the for loop, then I can explain that this is our iterative variable and this is what we iterate through. And here, this was my list and it was the index that the for loop generates based on the length of my list. So now I would show you another method of doing the exact same thing with a single statement. So how can we use a single statement if we want to print the elements of my list again? So this is how you do it. First of all, you have to start the square brackets and then you want to say to Python that I want to print the element x. For the element x in my list, and if I run this line of code, you would see that it would again print out all the elements in my list. So this is another way of doing that. Now I would show you an example how I can use or we can use a while loop for that. So for example, I declare a variable I is equal to 0 to initiate my loop, and then I write a keyword in Python that is while I is less than length of my list, and then I would terminate it with a colon operator, and then in the body I want to print each element of my list index by index and what was the variable I here, and then I want to update my variable by 1. I is equal to I plus 1, and if I run this line of code again, then you would see that it would again print out all the elements on the list. So these are the four ways how you can traverse through the list if you want to. So now I would show you some other tricks on the Python lists. So stay tuned. So now I would show you different examples of using for loop and if else statements using lists. So for example, I want to traverse through my list again, and I use the for loop again for x in my list, and I would terminate it with the colon operator. Now in my list, if there is a string a in x, then I would again use a colon operator to end the if statement, and I want to append a new list with elements having a. So for that I would use new list dot append, and I would pass x here. Now you can see the new list have a red line beneath and it shows that it has not been declared earlier. So I have to initiate it as an empty list because this is what I want to append. So what my this line of code does that it iterates through the lists and then it searches for each element if there is an A. If there is an A, then on my new list that was empty, it would append those letters, those elements here. So for example, my list here had apple, banana, kiwi, cherry, apricot, and here you can see that kiwi and cherry did not have any A. So let's run this code and print our new list and see what happens. And if I does so, you can see that it returned me only the things which had the alphabet A in that. So this is one example how you can use a nested for and if else statements if you want to specify a condition on specific entries of your list. So let's get back to another example of how we can do it with a single statement. So let's write a single line of code for that. So this is how you can do with a single statement. So I would declare a new variable called list1, and then I have to start with a square brackets again. Now I would write the whole statement that we did using 3 or 4 lines of code. So how x for x in my my list if a in x, and if I want to print this new list again, then you would see it did the exact same thing that these 4 lines of code did, and it read as x for x in my list. We get the iterative variable here, and then it put a condition on that iterative variable. So let's see another example of how we can use a for loop with a single statement to do different things on our list. So for example, I want to print the elements in my list if it is not an apple. So how would I do that? I would declare another variable list2 and initiate it with an empty list. So how would I do that? X for x in my list if x is not equal to apple. And if I print the new list, what is the problem here? X for x in my list. Yes, there was an issue. And now if I run this, then you can see the apple is not here anymore because it traversed through my list and it checked if there was an apple. It didn't print it because it was an exception here. If x is not equal to apple, because if there was an apple in my list, it did not account for that and it printed the rest of elements for that. So if I want to change all of my elements with a new string or new element, then how can I do that? So let's say I want to replace all my elements with the keyword with the word hello. Then I would use this list operator again and I would say hello for x in my list. And if I print the hello string, what it does, it would just replace all the items that were in my list with the word hello. So you can just use any string here and you can replace all the items from that. And you can also use a nested if else using a single statement, and for that I would show you another example. So now let's remove all the stuff we did here, and now I would show you an example how you can replace one element with another element using an if else statement. So this is how it's done. I say new list is equal to a list and I put pass x if x is not equal to banana, else orange for x in my list. And now if I want to print the new list, then you would see what happens. What it did, it just replaced the fruit banana with an orange. So this is how you can read it. X, if X not equal to banana, the condition on my element of the list, else orange. That is, if it's not banana, then leave it, and if it is banana, then replace it with orange and update my list. So if I run this again, you can see that this new list has no element banana in this. So these were the few operations that I wanted to share with you that you can perform on the list, and in the next video we would dig in further then how we can manipulate list for our usage. So I guess this was the end of today's tutorial, and if you are new to our YouTube channel, then click on the subscribe button and turn on the notifications for the upcoming videos. And for from my side, stay tuned and happy learning.